What is this one? Oh, good. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, and assembled company wherever you are in this world and whatever time zone you're in, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And Friday night is Children's Night. And I see Louis, you're just joining us. Hello, Louis. We can see your hand. Hello. And it is with great pleasure.
Hi, John.
Hello, Louis. Did you have a good Christmas and New Year?
Yeah, and you?
Yes, we're fantastic. Lockdown special, right? And so anyway, it's with pleasure, Louis. I've got a real special friend on tonight.
Okay.
It is with great pleasure that I introduce to Louis and the world my great friend from just off the M, actually not too far from you. She's just off the M25. You go south from the Fens, you go to Louis in Peterborough. So we come straight down the A1. We drop onto the 25. We just turn round one junction, and then we pop up again in the South Midlands, and we've got Sarah. So it's with great pleasure. Can we give a round of applause for Sarah Lloyd-Winder?
Woohoo! Thank you so much. And tonight, I have brought my magic lens to take us to many different places. Hello, Louis. I can see you through my magic lens. It's amazing. It's all weird. It makes everything look really odd. And I thought I would use my magic lens to take us on our journey of stories. So we start tonight with a cake. Does anybody like cake? I like cake. Oh, you like cake, Louis? Well, I've got this very special cake. It's an Italian cake and it's called a panettone. And it's very, very special because it has loads of lovely fruits and nuts and wonderful things in. And when you open it up, it smells so nice. And this is a story about a lady who was very good at making panettone. So, I think we should start with the Once Upon a Time because I like Once Upon a Time stories as well. Once upon a time, there was an old lady and she liked to keep her house very, very clean. And it was the middle of winter. And you know what happens in the middle of winter? Those people with big feet, they walk in the mud. And this poor lady called Bafana spent her entire life sweeping the floors and cleaning the floors and cleaning her house. Oh, it was terrible. But as well as being very good at cleaning, she was very good at cooking. Now this night, it was the middle of winter, just like it is now. Well, just a bit earlier than a week. And some of her friends had said, come round, we're going to have a midwinter feast. But Bafana, nope. She said, I've got such a filthy house. Everybody's walked the mud in and out. I don't know if anybody's parents ever say that to them. Clean your boots. Take your feet off at the door. Well, don't take your feet off, but we always used to say that. Take your feet off at the door. My mother was strange. Anyway, there was Bafana saying, I can't go out. I've got to clean the house. Once she cleaned the house, though, she looked around and then she found some beautiful things. She found some raisins and some dates and some nuts and some sugar and butter and flour and those strange candied fruit. And she made a great big cake and she mixed up that cake round and round and round until you couldn't tell whether it was a raisin, a nut, or a piece of candied fruit in the cake. And then she put it in a big cake pot one of those wonderful cake pots that make your cake rise up and up and up and up. Now, as she was cooking her cake, can you imagine the smell? It was wonderful. The smell floated out her window and down the pathway, all the way down to some men. Now, in another part of the country, 3 men had set off on a journey. They had seen a very, very bright star in the sky. It was a very strange star, and they said, "We want to follow that star, because there is a story that says if you follow a bright star like that, you'll find an amazing baby at the end." So they gathered together some special presents for this special baby, and they set off following that star. Every night in the sky, hung low, was this shining, twinkling, amazing star. And this night they were following the star. But sometimes, you know, you can't see the stars because the fog comes down and the clouds. Bit like tonight. It's very foggy here tonight. I don't know what it's like with you, but here it's very foggy. And the men following that star, they couldn't follow the star. And they got a bit lost. But suddenly, they smelt something. Can you smell it? Oh, it's a wonderful smell. It's hot cake. Hot cake with raisins. Hot cake with dates. Hot cake with fruity. Now, those men have been walking a long way in the dark of the night and smelling that cake. Oh, it made their tummies so hungry. So they turned off the pathway and walked towards the house where the smell was coming from. And they knocked at the door. And out came Bafana looking at them. "Oh, who are you?" she said. "Well," they said, "we are on a journey. But we can't follow the star as normal because the clouds have come down." And then we smelt this amazing smell. The smell was so beautiful. We had to follow the smell. And we've come all the way to your front door. Would you have a little bit, a little tiny bit of food to share with 3 hungry men? Well, Bafana, she loved sharing her food. And soon the men were inside. And she was giving them nice food to eat, sandwiches, and a good bit of salad, because you even need winter salad. But their noses kept twitching for the cake. When they'd eaten enough and had a drink, she brought out the cake, the beautiful cake, exactly like this panettone it would have been. All full of rich fruit and lovely smells. And each of them had a slice. A hot slice of cake. Is there anything better in the world than a hot slice of cake? So yummy. And after the men had finished their cake, they looked out the window and there was the star shining again. "We have to go," they said. "But Bafana, would you like to come with us?" Well, she still had a house to tidy and she had lots to do. And she said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. No, I can't come with you." "Are you sure?" said the men. "Your cake was so lovely. We might want another slice." "Oh, don't worry," she said. "I'll pack you all a slice of cake. But I really can't come. I've got all the tidying up to do from making and cooking now." "Well," they said, "if you do want to come, we're going to look for this special baby. He's very important. And we're taking him presents." "I'll remember," said Bafana. And she waved goodbye to the 3 men as they set off, each of them with a little piece of cake tucked in their bags. Well, Befana tidied her house and washed up all the dishes. And then she felt guilty. Somewhere there was a very special baby out there. And those men were taking presents. And what do men know about taking presents to children? They've probably got all the wrong things. Do you think they'd taken sweets and toys? Well, Befana was sure they hadn't taken sweets and toys. So she went and got a big bag and she filled it full of sweets and toys. And then she set off to follow the men. But she couldn't find them. She went down to the first village and she couldn't see the men anywhere. Perhaps the baby's here, she thought. So she left presents outside houses where she knew the children were. And then she went to the next village. No men. But she did leave presents again. And then she went to the next village. Now you see, those 3 men, oh, they were the wise men. You know, the ones in the story about the baby Jesus, the 3 wise men. Well, they weren't there on the night that the baby was born. They didn't come till much later because they had to follow the star. And in Italy, where Befana comes from, all the children believe that Befana comes on 12th night, the 12th night after Christmas. And on that night, she comes looking for the baby because she didn't follow the wise men carefully enough. So she has to leave presents for every child, just in case it's the special one. So in Italy, all the children on 12th night leave out a sock or a little bag or a shoe, and it's filled with sweets and presents by the magic lady Befana. And that is my story of the cake that smelt so lovely that the wise men had to stop and have a slice of cake. Isn't that a lovely story? And that was on Wednesday, you see. 12th night was on Wednesday.
Yeah, I should have taken my my back cloth down, but
oh no,
it's so nice. I wanted to leave it up.
Well, I believe that if it's greenery, and we can pretend yours is greenery, we can have it up.
It's got some greenery.
Yeah,
there we
you
are.
Can have it up till Candlemas.
Yes.
Whenever Candlemas is.
Yeah, but that's sometime. Besides, it's bound to be the right time somewhere in the world.
It is excellent. Yeah, because you know, everybody celebrates on different days. So,
hi Louis, you've got a question?
It's on the 2nd day of February.
Candlemas. You are very right. Yes, I couldn't remember. And that's when it's a celebration of light, isn't it? Candlemas. Well done, Louis.
Thank you, Louis. You've now educated us.
We're doing really well. So now we go from Italy and we take my magic orb, and we fly on, and we have another story. And this story, whoa, I had to go and find this. I can't play this. I would make a dreadful noise, but this is a horn or a trumpet. I think it's a trumpet. It's my son's. I had to go and steal it out of his room.
It's a bugle, isn't it? It's got no bells, hasn't it?
Right, it's a bugle. Yes. So this is part of the horn story. And this, if I blew it, was probably in the same state as the horn in my story, because it's been upstairs on the top of the shelf and it was a bit dusty when I went to get it. So this is an old story from Japan. There was once a musician, and he was a bit pompous. That's an interesting word, pompous, isn't it? He was puffed up and important, and he thought he was the most special thing in the world, and he thought he was the best musician ever. He could play any instrument. He was a bit of a show-off. So, one day, this very pompous or show-offy musician went to a big house, the house of a very important general. Oh, the house had very many beautiful things in it. And hanging up was a horn. And the horn was hanging very high up because it was ancient. And it shone beautifully because it was made not of copper or bronze like this. It was made of gold. Well, when the very pompous musician saw the horn, of course he wanted to play it. Yes, I'm so good. I can play any instrument. I'll play that one. Wow, it was hanging right up high in the rafters. The servants looked at one another. Really, he wants to play that? It's a bit dirty. But he insisted. He made a great fuss. So one of the servants had to get a wobbly ladder to go all the way up to the top, picked it up, ooh, and brought it down, dusted it a bit, and gave it to the musician. Well, the musician got himself all organised. I can play any instrument, he said. I'm just so clever. It's a skill, you know, a talent. I can play anything. So he picked up the horn and he put it to his lips and he took a great big breath in. Now, when he took a breath in, he didn't look inside, because inside the horn, and it'd been up in the ceiling for many years, was a spider, happily ignoring the rest of the world, having a really good time. There was a spider living in the horn. It made it, the horn, its home forever. And then this idiot suddenly breathed in. And when you breathe in through a long tube, you breathe everything in that's in the horn. And as the musician breathed in and in, the poor little spider curled its legs up small, like a little ball, and shot right back into the mouth of the musician. Once in the musician's mouth, in the dark, the spider put out all its legs, which tickled the throat of the musician. And just as he was about to make the most splendid noise, he made the most ridiculous noise ever. He went because of the spider tickling the back of his throat. And he breathed in again. And as he breathed in, the poor spider, who'd been trying to climb out of the mouth, was pulled back in, opened his legs again. And as the musician tried again, and at this point, the people in the room started to grin. But they were terribly polite and they didn't want to laugh. But when the musician tried again, and again he went, everybody started to giggle. But the musician, he wasn't, oh no, he was going to try it one more time. One more big breath. And this time that spider was having no more. He'd had enough of being breathed in and pushed out, breathed in and pushed out, and he stuck out his legs really fast. And as the musician opened his mouth, the spider leapt out right in front of everybody. And everybody looked, and they couldn't stop laughing and laughing and laughing and pointing as the poor musician was coughing and choking and his face got redder and redder and redder as everybody in the room was giggling and laughing and pointing and saying, some people shouldn't be so pompous and show-offy. They shouldn't say they can play any instrument, really. And the musician was so embarrassed as he looked round that he pulled himself up to his full height, 5'4" and 1/4, and he turned on his heel and he walked out of the room, and he was never, ever seen again because he was so embarrassed. That'll teach him to pretend to play a horn that's been up on the ceiling and is the home to a spider. And that is my story of the horn from Japan. Thank you. That's very naughty, isn't it? Poor little spider.
Pompous trumpet players.
Pompous trumpet players. I just think,
that's a mouthful. That's a never mind spiders. That's a mouthful in itself. Pompous trumpet players.
Yes.
Will blow
making
me down.
raspberry noises. I don't think I can even play it. Oh, I made a noise.
Yeah, but it was the one that with the spider in the back of the throat.
Was the best one. Mind you, it's a bit like playing the clarinet when you do the squeak. We've been having a lot of that recently. My son's learning to play the clarinet, and it makes a very funny noise. Anyway, so that was the beautiful horn story. And now we're going to travel on. Where shall we go now? I think it's time to change the hat for a cold hat. So this story comes from where you have to wear a very warm hat. Oof, this is my very furry hat. This hat makes me think of Russia and snow and cold, which is where the story of Mr. Frost comes from. So, we will hear the story. There was a little family, a father, mother and a child. But then the mother died. But the child, Martha, and the father got on very well. And she did lots of things around the house, and they coped. But she was a girl and she grew up. And the father, he got worried. I've got to tell her things when she grows up. I'm a man, I can't tell her anything. I need a woman in the house. So he looked around for a woman. Well, he had to marry her. So he looked around for somebody who had a clean and tidy house, which is a very silly thing to do, because he didn't look around for somebody he loved, because he loved Martha's mother, and he didn't really love the person he married the second time. But she did keep a very clean house, and she had 2 little girls, and he thought, well, the little girls will keep Martha company, and she'll keep a very clean house. But Martha's stepmother wasn't a nice lady. She came into the house and thought, oh, very smart house. I like this house. Oh, I'm going to be happy here. Well, there's a young girl here. Oh, but she does everything. She does the cooking and the cleaning. Well, I don't need to do it. She can keep doing it. That would be excellent. So instead of Martha getting a new mother, she just became the servant to the house. And because the 2 little girls saw their mother treating Martha badly, that's what they did. Get water, make us tea, mend my clothes, give me food. And it wasn't very nice. And by then, Martha's father couldn't make any changes. And as Martha grew up, things got worse and worse and worse. Until one day, the stepmother looked at Martha and thought, oh my goodness me, she's growing and she's very beautiful. That's not going to be good for when my daughters are big and they need husbands. Well, I better get her married soon. So she had to think of a plan. Who am I going to marry Martha to? So she told her husband, I think Martha should get married. And Martha heard this too. And she dreamed, as only girls can dream. She dreamed, oh, it might be Ivan. I'd love to marry Ivan. He plays the mandolin and he dances very well. And he always smiles at me when I go to the village. So Martha dreamed that she would marry Ivan. But the stepmother had different ideas. She thought and she thought and she thought. And she spent a long time coming up with a good plan. And then she announced it. Tomorrow, Martha, you will be getting married. So go and pack your box, ready to go. And then she told her husband, tomorrow you will take Martha on a journey to her husband. It's all arranged. And that was what was going to happen. Martha didn't know who she was going to marry. She still imagined it might be Ivan. Father, he didn't know either. Perhaps it would be Ivan, he didn't know. But the stepmother, oh, she'd come up with a great plan. And next morning, early, the father got the sledge ready, packed an extra blanket. This morning, Martha didn't have to make breakfast. The stepmother made it. She even gave Martha some hot soup. And then she took the father aside and said, you're to go out of the village, and when you get to the forest, you take the right turn right into the forest, and you go through the forest to where the mound is. And when there's the mound, there's a little hillock. And when you get to the top of the hillock with the 3 trees, that's where you leave Martha. Her husband-to-be, Mr. Frost, will be waiting. Mr. Frost? Mr. Frost was a magical being. Mr. Frost was ice. Mr. Frost was terrifying, and the father, he was shocked. And Martha overheard, and she started to cry. Mr. Frost, he's old and ancient, and he's a bit weird. I mean, he's very weird. He's the Frost. Don't be ridiculous, said the stepmother. You'll be very wealthy. You know, Mr. Frost, he's old. He's old money. He's very special and he's magical. You'll do very well. And she wouldn't hear any more. So there was Martha, packed off with her box on the back of the sledge. Her poor father, he was not happy. Out of the village they went, into the forest. They took the right turning. They went to the hillock. They went to the top of the little hillock. On the top there were 3 trees. The father got out Martha's box with all her belongings, and they weren't much. And she wasn't in much of a coat. It wasn't very warming. And her father kissed her on the cheek goodbye and quickly turned and got back in the sledge because he was crying. He didn't know what would happen to his beautiful girl, but it wouldn't be good. So poor Martha sat on her box. And she was outside in the cold, in the very cold, and there was snow everywhere. And her coat wasn't very warm. And she was slightly shivering. And then she heard the crickle, crackle, crickle, crackle in the trees. It was the frost coming. The crickle, crackle, crickle coming in the trees closer. The crickle, crackle, crickle in the first tree. The crickle, crackle, crickle in the second tree. And then the crickle, crackle, crickle above her. And the voice went, "Hello, young lady. Are you cold, young lady?" "No," said Martha, because she knew you shouldn't be rude. Crickle, crackle, crickle, and a wind blew round her. And she shivered, but she pushed her knees together and her heels down into the snow, and she held on tight. And the voice came again, "Are you cold, young lady?" "No, Mr. Frost," she said. "I am perfectly okay." And she shivered inside, but she didn't let it show. And the crickle, crackle, crickle came even closer, and the words came closer out of the cold wind that blew round and round her. "My little pink-cheeked pigeon," said the voice. "Are you cold, little lady?" "No, kind sir," she said. "I am perfectly all right." And then Mr. Frost, he leaned right out of the tree and around, and his face appeared right up close, and it blew cold and ice into her face. "Are you cold, young lady, my little sweet pink-cheeked pigeon?" he said. And she held on tight to all her shivering, because it was very, very cold with Mr. Frost that close. And she pushed her knees together and her heels into the ground, and she tried to be the nicest young lady in the entire universe. And she said, I am okay, sir." But she was shivering. And Mr. Frost looked at her, and how well-mannered she had been when she was so cold. And suddenly there was a big fur coat wrapped around her. And then a big fur rug tumbled over her knees, and a big fur hat, like my big red fur hat, was placed upon her head. And her cheeks were now rosy from warmth. Now back at home, the stepmother said, "Tomorrow morning you will have to go back to that hill and get the young lady, your daughter." And the poor father, he was devastated. He had to go back again. So the next morning, very sadly, he got on his sledge and he drove out of the village towards that little hillock, towards where those 3 trees were. And as he came near, he could hear singing and laughter. And he couldn't believe it. And as he got up close, he saw his beautiful daughter in the most beautiful furs, with a beautiful hat and a box box, an enormous box full of presents, twice the size of her little tiny box with all her belongings in the world that she had taken yesterday. And she had furry boots on that came right up over her knees, and gloves. And she had been singing. And she was ready to come home. And the father, he couldn't believe it. He picked her up and put her on the sledge. And they turned the sledge round full of presents and things, and oh, it was glorious. And she sang as she waved goodbye. Goodbye, Mr. Frost. And the icy wind blew. Goodbye. Well, the young lady arrived back at home, and was the stepmother happy to see her? No, she was not. How dare you arrive back looking like that? You are despicable. What have you done to come out with all this stuff? But then you see, the stepmother was not stupid. One girl goes out, comes back with all this. Two girls tomorrow go out. They could come back with so much riches. A new plan was made. Tomorrow, she said, you will take my daughters. And that's what happened the next morning. The two girls, her own daughters, were bundled onto the sledge, and off they went, through the wood, taking the right turning, up to the hill. On top of the hill were those three little trees. But these girls weren't like Martha. By the time they got there, they were arguing with each other, pinching and punching, and oh, they weren't happy. Well, the father put them down, little boxes, sat them on top, said, I'll see you later, and off he went. Well, they were mean girls, and they weren't happy. Even though they had twice as many clothes on as Martha had had on the day before, they were already shivering. It's horrible here, they said. It's really rotten. Why are we here? Don't like this place. A crinkle, crackle, crackle came through the trees, and the voice sang through the crisp air. Are you warm, little ones? No, we're not, they said. What do you think we are? We're freezing cold. We're icy. It's freezing out here. Are we warm? Are we warm, really? No, we're freezing cold. And they didn't get any better mannered. Each time Father Frost asked them, are you warm, little pigeons? Unlike when Martha had said, yes, and been very polite, they were rude. We are cold. This is a horrible place. We don't like it here. And the cold wind just blew, and Mr. Frost creakled and crunkled and creaked closer and closer until he climbed down out of the tree, and he stood in front of them, and he blew icy cold air into them until they became like little icicles. Well, the next morning, when the father came, the girls were icicles. They were frozen solid. And he picked them up and put them on the sledge and took them home. And the stepmother came rushing out of the house. Where are my little girls? Where are my little girls? What have they got? Have they got loads of wonderful furs? How high are their furry boots? How big are their furry hats? What presents have they brought me? And the father could do nothing. He lifted out the frozen, solid little girls from the back of his sledge. And the stepmother screamed, the scream of anger and frustration. And it went all the way round the woods. And I bet Mr. Frost heard it too. Well, there was nothing they could do. The stepmother and the father had to live together. And it is said that they came to some sort of accommodation. But Martha was now a wealthy woman with her furs and her presents. And she married the wonderful smiling Ivan, who played the mandolin so well and danced so beautifully. And it is said that they had 8 rosy-cheeked children. But the one thing their grandfather always said about those children, well, they were the most polite and well-mannered and glorious children ever, because their mother had taught them it was vital to be well-mannered. And that is the story of Mr. Frost from the cold lands of the north, where it's always icy and snowy. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a wonderful trio of stories. That was perfect. Louis, what do we think of those?
It was amazing.
Thank you. And Louis, if you want to join us on Tuesday, we've got children telling stories on Tuesday from all over the world at 5 o'clock on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. So I'll just remind you, I'll just bring that to your notice while you're still on. And Sarah, that was brilliant. That was lovely. Thank you. I don't know who we're going to have next Friday, but there'll be someone. I really need to have someone so Ali knows what to write on the schedule. But I promise, Ali, I'm only going to give you 1 or 2 at a time, not 3,000.
I can come back and do some more if you're desperate. So if you don't get anybody, I can come back. I've got another list. You've got a list.
Well, we might have you again later this month or something, or next month. But in fact, we'll have you back it was brilliant. It was lovely. We'd like to have Sarah back, wouldn't we, Louis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll find my proper ball, because this is only a lens. My crystal ball's gone walkabout. I need it.
Yeah, you can't lose crystal ball. How will you know what to do tomorrow if you can't find your crystal ball?
I will be lost.
Right. Well, thank you, Sarah. That's been lovely. One final round of applause. And if anyone's listening out there in the world, if they go to the site, if they want to pop a little 2pence into Sarah's hat, then she can buy breakfast tomorrow. You know, there's a. But how are you dealing with lockdown, Louis? Are you being okay with it?
Yeah, I think so.
That's all right. As long as spirits up and all that sort of thing. Well, you're always so cheerful anyway. Okay.
Yeah, I always do school work and even do online work as well. So it was very long time.
You managing to do your schoolwork online. Brilliant. Okay. Right. We'll see you. I'll see you next Friday, if not before. Stick your head in Tuesday night if you like. You'll enjoy that, Louis.
Okay.
Sarah, good night. One more round of applause for Sarah Lloyd-Winder.
Thank you.
And thank you, Ali, for driving the bus. Trying to do everything tonight.
Thank you,
Trying to do everything tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Louis. Well done.
Bye, Sarah.
Thank
Bye.
you. Woo! Bye. Take my hat off now.